Have you ever experienced a win so big, like so undeniably massive, that it just completely blinded you to reality?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like you get the promotion or, close that impossible deal, and suddenly you feel totally invincible.
Right. You start thinking you just can't lose. But here is the really paradoxical reality we are exploring today. Sometimes our greatest successes are actually the very things that set us up for our most devastating failures.
Yeah, the psychology of unexamined success is honestly terrifying. We are so conditioned to fear failure, but history routinely shows us that victory itself can be a much, much deadlier trap.
Exactly. And today's deep dive is centered on this forgotten king from the 8th century BC who, well, he learned this the hard way. He won the impossible battle, secured his empire, and then just let his ego drag his entire civilization into a catastrophic civil war.
The historical account we're dissecting today, which is found in the ancient text of 2 Kings chapter 14, is just an absolute masterclass in human nature.
It really is.
I mean, it features brewing civil wars, ancient political trash talk, kings trying to, negotiate partial obedience with God, and perhaps most surprisingly, the baffling and completely unmerited mercy of the divine.
So we've got a huge stack of theological commentaries, historical analyses, and verse-by-verse expositions to unpack this text for you today. Our mission is to really decode the spiritual psychology hidden beneath these ancient political wars.
And to do that, we have to set the stage, because the geopolitical landscape of the 8th century BC was deeply, deeply dysfunctional.
Yeah, you really can't just drop into this era without understanding the trauma that created it. To make sense of the madness, we have to look back to the year 931 BC.
Like the Golden Age.
Well, sort of. Prior to that, you had this glittering regional superpower, the United Kingdom of Israel under King David and King Solomon. But, Solomon's Golden Age came with a crushing price tag.
It definitely did. He financed his massive temples and palaces through really heavy taxation. And worse than that, literal forced labor conscripted from his own citizens.
And the breaking point comes immediately after Solomon dies. His son, Rehoboam, takes the throne, and the citizens present a very reasonable petition to him.
Yeah, they basically just ask for tax relief and an end to the brutal labor quotas. Just, give us a break.
Right, but Rehoboam, rather than acting like a shepherd of his people, he listens to his young, inexperienced peers. And he delivers one of the most arrogant political blunders in recorded history.
Oh, it's so bad. He essentially tells them, my father scourged you with whips, but I will scourge you with scorpions.
Just an unbelievable thing to say to your own people. And that arrogance instantly detonates the nation. 10 of the 12 tribes say, "We are out." And they form their own sovereign nation in the north.
And they keep the national name, Israel. While the remaining 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, they stay loyal to the Davidic bloodline in the south. So they become the kingdom of Judah.
Which leads us to what historians like to call the name game. And this is incredibly chaotic for anyone trying to trace this history. So we really need to break this down for you.
It is so confusing. You have 2 nations sharing the same DNA, the same history, the same ancestral covenant. But suddenly they're locked in this bitter, centuries-long Cold War.
Yeah, like a massive family business where the patriarch dies, the sons feud, and they open competing shops literally across the street from each other.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the terminology is vital because the ancient chroniclers use a variety of names. So let's look at the south first. Politically, they are Judah. Their capital is Jerusalem.
And in the poetic literature, like with the prophets, they are frequently called Zion, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And theologically, they are the house of David. Now, economically and militarily, Judah was almost always the weaker sister. Their land was more rugged, less fertile, off the major international trade routes.
But spiritually, they held the ultimate trump card. I mean, they possessed the true temple built by Solomon, the authorized Levitical priesthood, and, the messianic promise that a son of David would rule eternally.
Right. And tracing the history of the North is just a completely different experience. Looking through the sources, the North's lineage reads less like a royal dynasty and more like a mob turf war.
Oh, totally. Endless assassinations and shifting dynasties.
Right. And politically, they kept the name Israel. But because their most dominant wealthy tribe was Ephraim, prophets like Hosea frequently just refer to the whole nation as Ephraim.
And eventually, they build this massive capital at Samaria. But the North's spiritual foundation was fundamentally corrupt right from its inception.
Completely. When their first king, Jeroboam I, broke away, he faced a massive logistical and psychological problem. If his northern citizens kept traveling south to Jerusalem 3 times a year for the major religious festivals at the temple, well, their loyalty would inevitably drift back to the house of David.
So he just commits a calculated act of national apostasy. He builds 2 counterfeit worship centers, one at the northern border in Dan and one at the southern border in Bethel.
And he erects golden calves at both sites. He actually declares, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt."
Which is wild. And from that moment until the Assyrian Empire wiped them off the map centuries later, the northern kingdom never produced a single king that the historical records evaluate as spiritually good.
Not one. And to make it worse, every generation keeps naming their kids the same things. The sources show that kings across the border constantly shared names.
Yeah, it's like they're constantly sabotaging each other, but naming all their kids John and William.
Right. Sometimes this was due to brief diplomatic marriages, or because they both used names incorporating the name of Yahweh. Just prior to the events in chapter 14, the south had a king named Joash.
And at the exact same time, the north had a king named Jehoash, which is really just a variant spelling.
It's a fratricidal war between cousins who entirely forgot their shared covenant. Which brings us directly to the protagonist of the first half of our deep dive, King Amaziah of the southern kingdom of Judah.
Okay, so let's zoom in on Amaziah. His name means Yahweh is mighty. He ascends to the throne in Jerusalem at age 25, and he rules for nearly 3 decades. His mother was Jehoash.
And the ancient chroniclers give him what we might consider a mixed performance review.
Yeah, a massive asterisk on his resume.
Exactly. They note that he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but crucially, not with the wholehearted devotion of his ancestor, King David. He acted more like his father, Joash.
I really want to dig into that specific critique because the text explicitly states the reason for his mixed review. It says he failed to remove the high places.
The high places, yes.
Now, it is so easy to read that and just assume it means, he didn't tear down a few local churches or something. But a high place in the 8th century BC was a deeply entrenched cultural and spiritual institution.
It was. Imagine you're a Judean farmer living, say, 20 miles away from Jerusalem. Traveling to the capital to offer a sacrifice requires leaving your crops, spending money, and navigating dangerous roads. It's highly inconvenient.
Right. So long before the temple was built, worshiping Yahweh on local hilltops was just common practice.
But as time passed, those hilltop shrines absorbed indigenous Canaanite practices. These weren't just quiet chapels. The Canaanite high places often featured carved wooden poles dedicated to the fertility goddess Asherah.
And stone pillars for the storm god Baal, right?
Yeah.
And rituals that included sacred prostitution and occasionally even child sacrifice.
Exactly. So by leaving these high places intact, Amaziah isn't just promoting religious freedom or convenience. He is actively enabling syncretism, the blending of Yahweh worship with pagan fertility cults.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Amaziah is checking the big, visible boxes of morality by maintaining the temple in Jerusalem, but he's leaving these local shrines completely untouched.
Right.
It's like someone who goes to church on Sunday but keeps superstitious idols or Lucky Charms in their basement. Or, a married couple who are mostly faithful, but one spouse refuses to delete their ex's phone number.
That's a great way to put it. It's obedience, but with a backup plan. And that loophole reveals a subtle but devastating internal reality. It's in complete surrender.
He's doing it on his own terms.
Right. Amaziah believes he can manage the spiritual life of his nation without fully submitting to the centralized, exclusive worship God demanded. And this lukewarm devotion creates an internal rot. It looks stable on the outside, but the foundation is hollowed out.
Ready to collapse under pressure. But we do see Amaziah acting with incredible moral clarity early in his reign.
We do, yeah.
When he first secures his political power, he rounds up and executes the palace officials who had assassinated his father. But he deliberately breaks the standard ancient Near Eastern protocol when he does it.
Which was a huge deal back then. In the ancient world, the universally accepted best practice for dealing with treason was absolute family annihilation. You eliminated the traitor, his sons, his grandsons, every male heir.
Right, blood feuds. You make sure no one grows up to come after you.
Exactly. This brutal secular pragmatism ensured your safety. By sparing the children, Amaziah is making a radical, incredibly risky political choice based entirely on the written law of Moses.
The historical record specifically cites the book of Deuteronomy here, chapter 24. It mandates that fathers shall not be put to death for the children, nor children for the fathers. Each person is responsible for their own sin.
So this proves Amaziah wasn't ignorant of the scriptures. He had a genuine functional respect for God's law when it came to criminal justice.
But that lingering pride we mentioned earlier, the pride that allowed the high places to remain, that is about to be violently inflated by a massive geopolitical triumph.
Right, because Amaziah decides to secure his southern borders and reestablish Judah as a regional power. He mobilizes his army and marches south of the Valley of Salt to wage war against the nation of Edom.
And we need some context on Edom. They are the descendants of Esau, the twin brother of Israel's patriarch, Jacob. So this is an ancient generational feud dating back to the womb.
It really is. And geographically, the Edomites controlled highly lucrative trade routes running from the Arabian Peninsula up to the Mediterranean. Plus, they had vital copper mines in the Araba Valley.
So this is about money and power.
Oh, totally. King David had previously conquered them, turning them into a vassal state, but they had successfully revolted a few generations before Amaziah. So this war isn't just about border security, it's about reclaiming lost imperial glory.
And securing a massive economic asset. And Amaziah executes this brilliant military campaign. He slaughters 10,000 Edomite soldiers in the Valley of Salt.
And then he pushes forward to capture the seemingly impenetrable fortress city of Selah. Historical consensus identifies Selah as the ancient city of Petra.
Petra, like carved directly into the sheer rose-red cliffs.
Exactly. It was accessible only through a narrow, winding canyon called the Sick. Taking Petra in the ancient world was considered a tactical impossibility. But Amaziah does it.
And to cement his incredible victory, Amaziah renames the city Joktiel, which translates to subdued by God.
So aesthetically, it is the peak of his reign. He credits Yahweh with a victory by renaming the city.
But, and this is a huge but, the chroniclers in 2 Chronicles give us the unseen, behind-the-scenes spiritual reality of this campaign. While Amaziah publicly named the city as a monument to God, he secretly looted the Edomite temples.
Which is just mind-blowing.
Right. He brought the idols of the people he had just slaughtered back to Jerusalem, set them up in his own palace, and actually began bowing down to them and burning incense.
It's the ultimate paradox.
Put yourself in the shoes of a Judean priest watching this happen. How does a king win a war against an ancient enemy with God's explicit help, name the conquered city, God subdued it, and then immediately start worshiping the literal statues of the army he just defeated?
It defies all logic.
Doesn't success usually solidify your faith? I mean, if the Edomite gods couldn't protect Edom from Amaziah, why on earth would Amaziah want their protection?
It seems completely irrational until you understand the psychology of ancient warfare and what we call success-induced amnesia.
Success-induced amnesia.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Amaziah mistook a moment of divine grace for permanent personal strength. In the ancient mindset, capturing a nation's gods was the ultimate display of dominance. It proved your deity was stronger.
Okay, so it starts as a power move.
Right. But Amaziah's pride twists this. Having conquered the physical territory, his ego convinces him that he must conquer the spiritual territory as well. He likely thought, if I appease these foreign gods alongside Yahweh, I will be truly invincible. I'll command the spiritual forces of all the nations.
Wow. So it is the toxic culmination of the syncretism he allowed by keeping the high places. The physical victor literally becomes the captive to the religion of the losers.
Exactly. The victory didn't make him humble. It made him dangerously arrogant. He starts believing he is the architect of his own universe.
Drunk on this victory over Edom, Amaziah looks north. He decides that being the king of Judah just isn't enough anymore. He lets to be the undisputed heavyweight champion of the entire divided kingdom.
So he sends diplomatic messengers up to Samaria, directly to Jehoash, the king of Israel, and issues a formal military challenge. He says, "Come, let us look one another in the face."
Which is such a polite way of saying, let's go to war.
It's stunningly reckless diplomatic maneuver. Israel's military was significantly larger, better funded, and far more experienced than Judah's.
And Jehoash, the northern king, he receives this challenge. And rather than mobilizing his chariots immediately, he engages in this brilliant piece of psychological warfare. He sends Amaziah a parable.
The ancient trash talk in this parable is just legendary.
Oh, it's brilliant. Jehoash replies, "The thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, 'Give thy daughter to my son to wife.' And there passed by a wild beast that was in Lebanon and trode down the thistle."
And then he provides the completely unvarnished interpretation. He says, "You have indeed smitten Edom, and your heart has lifted you up. Glory of this, and tarry at home. For why should you meddle to your hurt, that you should fall, even you, and Judah with you?"
I love it. It's like a middle school wrestler who manages to pin his cousin in the backyard and suddenly thinks he can step into the ring with a professional heavyweight champion.
That is exactly what it is. And the metaphor is devastating because it's so accurate. The thistle represents Amaziah. A thistle is prickly, it's annoying, it can cause a minor nuisance, but it is small, fragile, and rooted in the dirt.
Right, you just step on it.
Exactly.
Oh.
While the cedar of Lebanon represents Jehoash and the northern kingdom. Cedars were ancient, majestic, towering trees, the ultimate symbol of unshakable established power.
And the thistle demands a royal marriage alliance with the cedar, demanding to be treated as an absolute equal.
But the crushing insult is that the cedar doesn't even have to fight the thistle. A random wild beast just happens to wander by and tramples the thistle out of existence.
Jehoash isn't even angry, he's bored. He's just telling him, stay home before you get stepped on.
What is fascinating here is the secular wisdom of Jehoash. The biblical text evaluates him as a wicked king because he perpetuated the golden calf worship. Yet politically, he is offering Amaziah a very clear off-ramp.
Yeah, he is giving the arrogant king of Judah a chance to save face, stay home, enjoy his victory over Edom, and avoid a completely catastrophic war.
It perfectly illustrates the anatomy of sin. The destruction doesn't start on the battlefield, it starts internally. Jehoash accurately diagnoses Amaziah's problem. Your heart has lifted you up.
Pride makes us deaf to wisdom, even when that wisdom comes from an enemy offering us a way out.
Right. And Amaziah ignores the parable. He refuses the off-ramp.
And the consequences are immediate and just brutal. The two brother nations crash into each other. The northern army of Israel marches south, and they meet Judah's forces at a place called Beth Shemesh.
This detail is critical because Beth Shemesh is deep inside Judean territory. Israel wasn't just defending their border, they pushed south aggressively.
The ensuing battle is an absolute rout. The text states that Judah was put to the worst before Israel. The Judean army completely disintegrates. The soldiers abandon their king and scatter to their tents in terror.
And Amaziah, the king who thought he was absolutely invincible, is captured by Jehoash right there on his own soil.
But capturing the king isn't enough for Jehoash, is it?
No, not at all. He wants to ensure Judah never threatens him again. He takes his royal prisoner, marches his massive army up to the gates of Jerusalem, and executes a calculated, multi-tiered humiliation of the capital city.
He orders his troops to break down the sacred city wall from the gate of Ephraim to the corner gate. We're talking about 400 cubits, roughly 600 feet of solid stone fortification.
Consider the logistics and the psychology of that act. Tearing down 600 feet of an ancient Near Eastern city wall, which could be up to 20 feet thick, requires immense sustained labor.
Yeah, this isn't just a quick skirmish.
Right. Jehoash's army likely spent weeks dismantling the defenses, while the citizens of Jerusalem just had to watch in horror. In the ancient world, a city's wall was its glory. It was its primary defense and its literal identity.
By leaving a gaping 600-foot hole facing north, Jehoash is permanently castrating Judah's military prestige. He is signaling to the surrounding empires that Jerusalem exists solely by Israel's permission.
The physical devastation is matched only by the spiritual trauma. Following the demolition, Jehoash plunders the city. He empties the royal palace of its treasures, but far more devastatingly, he raids the house of the Lord.
The temple.
Yes. He takes all the gold, the silver, and the sacred vessels dedicated to the worship of Yahweh, seizes hostages to guarantee Amaziah's future compliance, and marches back north to Samaria.
The geography of this looting is profoundly tragic. The sacred vessels, consecrated by Solomon for the pure worship of God, are hauled off as war booty to Samaria, a capital city entirely devoted to the counterfeit worship of golden calves.
It is the ultimate spiritual humiliation.
I look at this absolute wreckage and have to wonder about the divine mechanics behind it. I mean, did God allow this wild northern beast to trample Judah just to punish Amaziah? Or was there a deeper redemptive purpose to wake him up?
If we trace the causality, Amaziah's physical walls were breached by a foreign army only after his spiritual walls had already been demolished by his own pride.
Right. He compromised with the high places. He brought Edomite idols into the holy city.
God often allows the natural consequences of our arrogance to systematically dismantle the false security we build. That gaping hole in the wall was a brutal, visible reminder that Judah's true defense was never their stone fortifications, but their obedience to God.
That is the hard grace of divine discipline. Jehoash eventually returns to Samaria and dies shortly after, but Amaziah's story doesn't end there. He is left to rule over the ashes of his own arrogance.
The historical records say Amaziah lived for 15 years after the death of Jehoash.
What a miserable, hollow twilight that must have been. He's a king in name only, reigning over a bankrupt city with a demolished wall.
Yeah, when a leader drags their nation into an entirely preventable, disastrous war fueled purely by personal ego, and the result is total economic and social ruin, you can understand why the populace would turn on him.
And they do. A conspiracy ferments right there in Jerusalem among his own nobility. His political authority is completely shattered.
He discovers the assassination plot and flees southwest to the city of Lachish. Lachish was the second most important city in Judah, a heavily fortified military stronghold.
He's desperately hoping that the towering walls of Lachish can protect him from his own people, seeing as the walls of Jerusalem couldn't protect him from his enemies.
But you cannot outrun the consequences of your own rebellion. The assassins track him down to Lachish and murder him right there.
His body is strapped to a horse, brought back to the capital, and buried in the city of David. It's a sad end. He survives the war, but he never recovers his authority. He's basically a dead man walking for 15 years.
It is a pathetic end. However, immediately following his assassination, the text reveals an incredibly profound detail about the geopolitical stability of Judah.
The transition of power.
Yes, the transition is astonishing. Rather than plunging into a bloody, protracted civil war, which, was standard operating procedure in the Northern Kingdom after an assassination, the people of Judah unite.
They completely bypass the generals, they bypass the ambitious noblemen, and they unanimously place the crown on the head of Amaziah's 16-year-old son, Azariah, also known as Uzziah.
That unity is staggering. The conspiracy was clearly against Amaziah the man, not against the Davidic dynasty. Placing a teenager on the throne demonstrates a deeply rooted covenantal loyalty to God's promise that a descendant of David must rule.
And this kid, Uzziah, he wastes zero time. The very next verse says he immediately rebuilt the city of Elath and restored it to Judah.
Rebuilding Elath is a strategic masterstroke by a teenager. Elath was a vital port city located on the northern tip of the Gulf of Aqaba, leading out to the Red Sea.
King Solomon had used it centuries earlier to launch massive trading fleets to Africa and Arabia. Right?
Yeah. Exactly. By securing this port, Uzziah instantly injects life into Judah's shattered economy. He opens up lucrative maritime trade routes, totally bypassing the land routes controlled by hostile neighbors.
It is a beautiful typological picture of God's resilience. It's like God is saying, the king failed, but my promise to David didn't. Right out of the ashes of a humiliated civilization, a teenager steps up and begins to rebuild the ruins.
It's an incredible comeback.
But while Judah is slowly and painfully clawing its way back from the brink, the narrative camera pans sharply back up north to Israel. And what we see there completely shatters our traditional understanding of how God deals with wicked nations.
We are introduced to the reign of Jeroboam II, who takes the northern throne after his father Jehoash dies.
And he rules for an unprecedented 41 years in Samaria.
To put that in context, he provides 4 decades of stability to a nation that usually measured its dynasties in months or single-digit years.
Yet the biblical author doesn't hesitate to give him the absolute lowest spiritual grade possible. The text explicitly states he did evil in the sight of the Lord, refusing to turn away from the calf worship of Jeroboam I.
Right. He maintained the counterfeit priesthood. He kept golden calves at Dan and Bethel. He perpetuated the spiritual rot of his nation.
Theologically, he is a disaster, but politically and militarily, he is a juggernaut.
Oh, an absolute powerhouse. The historical record shows that he recovers vast territories for Israel. He expands their borders from the Hamath Pass far up north in Syria, all the way down to the Dead Sea in the south.
He even recovers control of Damascus. He basically restores the borders of the northern kingdom to match the glorious territorial expanse of King Solomon.
It's a massive golden age.
But I have to push back hard here, because this narrative feels like a massive contradiction. It completely flips the script. We are taught that if you obey God, you prosper, and if you disobey, you fall.
Right. The Deuteronomic covenant.
Exactly. Moses makes it very clear. Obey Yahweh, receive rain, victory, prosperity. Rebel and worship idols, receive famine, disease, defeat. But Jeroboam II is an evil king, leading an idolatrous nation, yet he oversees a roaring economy and massive military wins.
It is a huge paradox.
It's like a corrupt CEO posting record profits year after year while all the ethical companies go bankrupt. How do we make sense of that?
It's one of the most profound theological paradoxes in the historical books. To understand it, we cannot rely on the book of Kings alone. We have to cross-reference the prophets who were actively preaching in the streets of Samaria during Jeroboam's reign.
The prophets Amos and Hosea.
Yes. They were both ministering at the exact height of this supposed golden age.
Yeah.
And their writings paint a very, very different picture of this prosperity.
They reveal the rotting, putrid underbelly of this economic boom, don't they?
They do. Amos absolutely excoriates the wealthy elite of Samaria. He describes them lounging on expensive ivory beds, drinking wine from massive bowls, singing idle songs, all while they systematically crush the poor.
Just total decadence.
Yeah. He accuses the corrupt judges of selling out the righteous for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals. The outward military expansion and the influx of trade wealth completely masked a deep structural moral decay.
The society was prospering financially, but it was completely bankrupt morally. So the wealth was real, but it was highly concentrated and built on severe social injustice.
Exactly. It proves that national prosperity is not synonymous with God's approval. A booming stock market and a strong military are not barometers of a nation's moral correctness.
But it still doesn't explain why God allowed Jeroboam II to expand the borders in the first place if the nation was so wicked. Sometimes God blesses a nation for reasons completely independent of their moral character, right?
Yes, and the author of 2 Kings anticipates our confusion here. To explain the mechanics behind this unmerited blessing, he pulls back the curtain and introduces a historical cameo by a prophet most people only associate with a Sunday school story about a giant fish.
Okay, yes.
The text notes that Jeroboam recovered these territories according to the word of the Lord God of Israel, which he spake by the hand of his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, which was of Gath-hepher.
Jonah, the exact same Jonah who gets swallowed by the whale.
Yes. This is the only historical mention of Jonah outside his own prophetic book, and it grounds him firmly in the geopolitical reality of the 8th century BC.
So he wasn't just a myth.
Not at all. He was a real, working prophet from a small town in Galilee. And look at his assignment here. He is functioning as a highly successful nationalist prophet. He is delivering the exciting prophecies of military victory and border expansion to his own people.
Think about the psychology of that. We know Jonah as the guy who violently rebelled when God told him to go preach to Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, Israel's greatest enemy.
Right.
But prior to that, Jonah was the guy standing in the royal court of Samaria, prophesying immense blessing over his own nation. He loved being the bearer of good news for Israel.
He just hated the idea that God might extend that exact same unmerited mercy to his geopolitical rivals. Which brings us to the profound theological heartbeat of this entire narrative. Why did God give Jonah this message of blessing for a wicked king?
The text explicitly tells us, doesn't it?
It does. It says, "For the Lord saw the affliction of Israel, that it was very bitter. For there was not any shut up, nor any left, nor any helper for Israel. And the Lord said not that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, but he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam the son of Joash."
That is staggering. God didn't save Israel because they repented. They didn't tear down the golden calves.
No, they didn't.
He didn't bless them because they suddenly started treating the poor with justice. He saved them simply because they were suffering, because they had absolutely no helper, and because he had made a prior covenant commitment not to wipe them out.
God used a wicked, arrogant king as a blunt instrument of his mercy to preserve the covenant lineage. It completely shatters the transactional view of religion.
It shows that God's grace can be completely unmerited. He operates on a level of mercy that defies our basic formulas.
There is a massive, unseen spiritual war happening here that stretches back to the book of Genesis. God had made an unconditional promise to Abraham that through his descendants, all the nations of the earth would be blessed.
A promise culminating in the Messiah.
Exactly. And Satan, understanding this redemptive timeline, continuously sought to exterminate the nation of Israel before the Messiah could arrive. Prior to Jeroboam II, the oppression from the Syrian Empire had been so severe that Israel was nearly annihilated.
And Assyria was also a looming threat, but historical records show that during Jeroboam II's reign, the Assyrian Empire experienced a period of internal weakness.
Yes, under kings like Shalmaneser IV. So God sovereignly orchestrated the geopolitical landscape. He used Assyria's temporary weakness and Jeroboam II's military ambition to create a protective barrier around the northern kingdom.
He physically preserved the nation of Israel so the redemptive plan could continue, completely independent of the king's personal wickedness.
It is grace operating on a cosmic strategic level.
As we stand back and look at the wreckage of Amaziah's pride in the south and the hollow paradoxical success of Jeroboam II in the north, we have to transition from ancient history to modern reality. How do we apply these ancient geopolitical lessons to our lives right now?
Well, if we look at the individual level, Amaziah's tragic arc is a severe warning about the danger of partial obedience. He did what was right, but he tolerated the high places.
Right.
We have to ruthlessly audit our own lives. What are the high places we refuse to tear down? What are those subtle compromises, the unethical habits, the toxic relationships we keep around because we think we can manage them?
It is the delusion of control. We think, I go to church, I pay my taxes, I'm a generally good person, so this one little area of compromise won't hurt me.
But Amaziah proves that those unaddressed high places eventually become the exact footholds for our destruction.
Success can be a believer's greatest danger. When we achieve success, when we conquer our personal Edom, that lingering pride convinces us we crown ourselves king of the hill and stop relying on God.
We stop relying on the deep roots of the cedar, and we start acting like the thistle, demanding the universe bow to us. And culturally, the reign of Jeroboam II challenges our modern obsession with material success.
Yeah, we live in a society that equates wealth and power with virtue.
But the biblical text insists that a society can look incredibly successful on spreadsheets, booming markets, military supremacy, while being spiritually bankrupt and morally putrid. True success is obedience to God, not victory over Edom.
But intertwined with these severe warnings is a profound undercurrent of hope, isn't there?
Absolutely. For the believer who feels like they have failed or who is living in the wreckage of someone else's bad decisions, the story of the 16-year-old Azariah stepping up to rebuild the port of Elath is incredibly encouraging.
It shows human failure, even on a catastrophic national level, cannot derail God's ultimate redemptive plan. He is always preparing the next generation to rebuild the ruins.
And for the rebellious, God's unmerited mercy toward Israel under Jeroboam II demonstrates his immense patience. He sees the bitter affliction of humanity. He provides space and time for repentance.
But, as the later history of the Assyrian invasion proves, if that mercy is continually exploited, the wild beast of judgment will eventually arrive. It all comes back to how we view ourselves. Are we the thistle demanding respect, or are we relying on the roots of the cedar?
The narrative demands that we look far beyond the superficial metrics of our successes and failures, forcing us to examine the actual architecture of our hearts.
We have covered centuries of geopolitical drama today. We watched a kingdom fractured by ancient grudges. We saw King Amaziah secure an impossible military triumph, only to immediately surrender his soul to the idols of his defeated enemies and lose his sacred city wall to his own unchecked ego.
We analyzed the brilliant psychological warfare of the thistle and the cedar.
And we marveled at God's incomprehensible mercy, using a wicked king and a very reluctant prophet to preserve a rebellious nation purely out of compassion for their suffering.
It really forces us to confront how deeply we misunderstand both power and grace.
It does. And as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over regarding the prophet Jonah. Put yourself in his sandals for a moment. He stood in the royal courts of Samaria. He prophesied economic and military dominance for his own people.
He loved it.
He watched firsthand as God poured out completely unearned, life-saving mercy on the wicked, idolatrous nation of Israel through Jeroboam II. He saw the sheer magnitude of God's grace. Yet, just a few short years later, when God asked Jonah to take that exact same unearned mercy across the desert to the brutal city of Nineveh, Jonah ran in the absolute opposite direction.
He was furious.
He was furious that God would be kind to his enemies. It begs a deeply uncomfortable question for all of us. Are we only okay with God's radical, rule-breaking grace when it is directed at us, but absolutely infuriated when he extends it to the people we despise?
That is the ultimate mirror this ancient text holds up to our modern souls.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking the hard questions and never stop looking past the surface of the text.